we just watched the Munster final there. What are your first thoughts after watching that?
Just how impressive Limerick were. You know, I suppose it was kind of an interesting stat coming into this, the fact that they'd won two games, and the two games that they'd won were against Clare and Waterford, and given how poor they were, maybe you were slightly unsure of their form, but I don't think there's any doubt now about their form. I mean, that's the third final win that they've won in 10 months, possibly the most impressive of the three, considering that the All-Ireland they were hanging on at the very end. The league final, maybe there's a bit of caveat that it's the league and you're kind of unsure about how Waterford were going at that time, but I mean, like the last quarter in particular, I think it was 118 to 212 just when Kyle Hayes got that second goal. That put them 6 clear. They had 7 points in a row after that, and just like there were scores coming from everywhere. There was guys powering forward, like Tom Morrissey, Gerard Hegarty, Peter Casey. I thought he was man of the match, and just by the final whistle they looked like a side with just a huge amount of scoring options, a huge amount of guys in good form. And on a day when we're finishing the provincial action, the current title holders are definitely, I think, at the front of the pack as we're heading into the All-Ireland series.
Do you think some of Tip's underlying weaknesses that hadn't been exposed before this were? And just a couple of examples: the midfield completely overrun. What's his name? Michael Breen had a terrible time on Keane Lynch. He was swapped with Dan McCormick. Dan had a bit more joy, but not massively. Breen was taken off. James Barry, full-back, very uncomfortable on the ball, was turned over a number of times, including by Peter Casey for the second goal as well. And they were issues that were there last year, both of those positions, and possibly even the idea of putting Breen full-back. But again, not to labour on that because that's been talked about so much. Were those underlying weaknesses exposed for them?
Yeah, well, it was just interesting. Anytime anyone seemed to get the ball in the middle third, I mean, like, I suppose we knew beforehand it was going to be very, very congested, that you were going to try in one hand, I suppose, isolate Aaron Gillan for Limerick. That was their main objective. Tipperary were going to try and get the likes of Callan and John McGrath into a bit of space, so we thought there'd be a lot of bodies in the middle third. But it just struck me that at times when the Tip players were getting the ball in the middle third, it seemed like there was 3 or 4 Limerick guys around, and that wasn't kind of being replicated elsewhere. And look, I mean, Michael Breen taken off at half time, Noel McGrath gone off halfway through the second half, John McGrath gone off before the end, John O'Dwyer gone off before the end. Maybe it's a bit of a simplistic thing to look at sometimes, but I think in this case it's kind of instructive that they were the guys that seemed to be in really, really good form. If you look at Tip's run to date, now you can say, look, opposition that they faced, Cork weren't at the races in the first game, and Waterford and Clare didn't have good round robin campaigns, but these were the guys kind of setting the tone. Maybe it was a case of Limerick were kind of targeting them. I think John McGrath, he got through for the goal, but otherwise we didn't really kind of see him. A couple of early points from John O'Dwyer. I don't think he was helped with some of the balls that were going into him. A lot of it seemed to be kind of like head high, or he was kind of trying to put up early to try and bring it down to control it.
Well, what I thought was a big problem was you're going to have to go along with some puck outs, of course, and that Limerick half backline of Morrissey, Burns and Hannon is absolutely huge, so you don't necessarily want to hit long on that. And Tip don't have too many guys who are unbelievable fielders, and obviously Bonner is missing as well. But when Tip were going short and Limerick were sitting off him and inviting him on, the guys that Limerick were leaving more or less free, saying give it to that guy, they're not comfortable on the ball, and I'm talking about a couple of them there as well. So Tipperary, could they have looked at, would we play Alan Flynn in the cornerback? He'd be a bit more comfortable on the ball. A couple of different guys like that, or even switch back Paddy Maher, so that even if Limerick allowed him to have 1 or 2 balls and they changed, then the short option would be further out the field because they push up on Paddy or something like that. It was as if Tip kind of more or less just gave into that and continued to do what wasn't working.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I wonder, in a way, I suppose the Limerick team they were facing today was just so vastly different to the one. I mean, if you look at the 4 guys that Limerick brought back into the team, how much of an impact they had.
4 of the best hurlers in the country.
And I mean, we knew they were going to have that much of an impact, but I suppose Tipperary kind of weren't prepared to play them. I mean, look, Hannon and Lynch have been kind of established figures for a while. Graham Mulcahy's around a long time. Limerick or Tip would have faced him. But I suppose with someone like Gerard Hegarty, I mean, if his shooting had been on target, he probably would have got man of the match. Okay, Brian Hogan made an outstanding save in the first half from him, and probably was one of the guys that kind of kept Tip in it really.
But they had so many. Limerick had so many goal chances throughout the course of the game as well, and Tipperary, obviously there was the 2 goals, and then the other goal chance, which was from Seamus Callan in the first half, came from a puck out that bounced inside the 40.
Yeah, and he got the one flick down in the Ennis Road.
And half the chances that Tip created in the first half came in a 10-minute spell, and after Tip went 164 ahead, it was just like a complete shutdown from Limerick as well. They're so impressive. Their response to the first goal was to hit 7 of the next 10 points. the response to the
Well, like
second goal
it
was,
went from 5 down at kind of midway through the first half to being ahead by 2,
Yeah.
which was an unbelievable position for him to be going to.
and then the second goal was, the response was to score 13 of the next 15 points. And the last 20 minutes, or sorry, there was 18 or 19 minutes towards the end of the game where Nicky Quaid didn't even have a puck out. That's how dominant it was.
Yeah, well, it probably just says a lot about their mentality, doesn't it? Like, I mean, even I was kind of struck afterwards as well how, for a team who a lot of them were winning their first once a senior title, they were quite composed. Like, you know, I thought, like, I suppose you think to 6 years ago when it was down here in the Munster final, you know, such an explosion of joy that day. I suppose maybe it was a different thing that so many of those kind of longer serving players had finally kind of gotten over the line. But the kind of players, like the way Limerick were after the match was kind of the way they were during the game. And like that, when those goals went in, when they had those setbacks, they were just very, very calm and composed. I suppose they kind of just trusted what they were doing, and they just had guys, particularly around kind of the middle third, were in really, really good form from the start.
Limerick clear favourites for the All-Ireland now?
I think they have to be, you know. I mean, there's just question marks over everyone else, isn't there? I mean, like you've the two sides who lost today. The scale of defeat for Tipperary is an issue. Kilkenny now, they've lost to Galway and Wexford, and they have to go the quarter-final route. You know, Wexford, that's obviously, you know, a massive breakthrough win, and probably, you know,
Feels like 1996, Limerick and Wexford in the All-Ireland semi-finals.
Yeah, and like I suppose, like Wexford will probably savour today maybe a bit more as the county because they've had so little kind of
Are you
success.
suggesting they're going to go on the beer incessantly after this?
The last couple of years, but I mean, like, you know, they've had so many beatings against Kilkenny. Probably started to turn it, I suppose, with that 21 teams, kind of 13 to 15, and then Cork. You know, I suppose it's still just a little bit uncertainties about the way they kind of drift in and out of games. Maybe their defence. Yeah, I think, you know, it's as it was before the championship when most people thought about the league. Limerick at the head of the pack.
Can Tipperary recover from that? Because like 2010, Tip were annihilated by Cork, by your county Cork, by 10 points. Came back and won the All Ireland, but there was like a quiet run through the qualifiers where the likes of Bonner Maher was discovered, Garrod Ryan at the time, who became a very important player, and you know, they had that time to build up, whereas you have to build up in 2 weeks for Laois or Dublin, and find players from where.
Well, the difficulty is the injuries that they lost. You know, the game 2 weeks ago, I suppose, like, it was a very simple way of looking at it coming into today. Tipperary were down 2 really key guys. Limerick were bringing back 4 more. And we saw it happen. And you know, that's going to be a big problem for them. You know, you miss Bonner's drive in the half-forward line, and then Carl Barrett is kind of a calm influence in the full-back line. It's going to be very difficult to kind of spring, you know, who came on today.
Jerome Cahill did well, and he was probably about the only young bright spark from today.
Like, it was the thing I thought about the 21 team that won last year. That was a brilliant win for Tipperary to be a very, very fancy Cork.
There were no stars on that team,
but Cork probably had the bigger senior players out of that team, the guys who could make a very, very quick step up. So there's a couple of Tip guys you think maybe 2 or 3 years, probably very difficult to see them making a massive impact in the 2 or 3 weeks that Tipperary will need them.
Well, you have to say, actually, just to touch on that under 21 final again last year, those 5 senior stars that Cork had on that team, the like of Kingston and Mark Coleman, and I know Coleman isn't a massive player, but they're very physically filled out players. Even Declan Dalton is after coming through. A lot of these young Tip players coming through are very callow sort of players as well. Look like they need 2 or 3 years of S&C. Even the senior team that's out there today, like speed was definitely an issue at times as well. So it might take a little bit longer to get this Tip team and the emerging players up to the top level, which is why it's going to be very hard to come back and win the All Ireland this year.
See, that's the template Limerick set. I mean, like Jake Morris is obviously a gifted hurler. You know, you can see for a guy who's like, he's still under 20, you know, just out of minor last year, and he's able to kind of show touches, you know, like really, really good in front of goal. But it's just so difficult to kind of win that primary possession and to be kind of getting away from, you know, if you're operating close to goal, you've someone like Sean Finn or Richie English down your back, you're trying to win the ball around midfield. You know, you've got the imposing of that half back line, and then you've someone like Garrod Hegarty coming back. And it's just the physique that Limerick bring to it. Like, even if you look at kind of one of the big new players Limerick brought in this year, and he didn't even get a game today, was Paddy O'Loughlin. He's a huge man, and he fits perfectly into that half back line if one of the established trio drop out, as we've kind of seen. So that's like, it's just asking a lot, I think, for these guys to kind of expect them from a Tipperary point of view to come in and make a big impact. But I think it's more like that they need the guys that have been showing such good form up until now. I suppose you're hoping that today is just an aberration, really, that they're going to kind of get back to full speed quick enough.
Yeah, as a Tipperary man, I don't actually feel that that's the way. Wexford against Kilkenny. I kind of stole one of your talking points from earlier in the week from the 42 about Davy Fitzgerald. He's now got an unbelievable record in terms of silverware collected. So you'd mentioned how Fitzgibbon with LIT, Munster with Waterford, Clare All Ireland, Clare League, and now Wexford, Leinster. Like that's unheard of. Is there anyone who's even come close to that collection?
No, I think, as much as we can say, I think it is the clean sweep. So like John Kiley now after today, and of the current managers, Liam Sheedy, Brian Cody and Micheál Donoghue, they've all won, say, 3 of the big 4 senior trophies, but they haven't won the other province, the one opposite, the one that they would operate in. So it's a massive achievement, and I think this one in particular, given like it was 2015, I think Wexford were absolutely hammered out the gate in Nolan Park by Kilkenny.
Yeah, 24 points, wasn't it?
Now I know he had a couple of under 21 teams coming through to kind of work with, but it's still unbelievable to get them to a stage where you beat them in 2017, you lose by a point, I think it was last year in Nolan Park, you draw a couple of weeks ago in the round robin, and now you manage to beat them when it really, really matters on a final day. And he looks to have brought them on a fair bit from, say, the 2017 final, where it was a brilliant occasion for them to get to, and it was a huge thing for the county, but they never really looked like winning that game.
After a half hour, it was kind of as if they were just praying for half time almost, because Galway physically overwhelmed them.
Yeah, and I think it was 29 points they conceded that day. Like they matched Kilkenny point for point today from, I suppose, kind of what we were looking, catching the footage of the game here. And just look, it's a huge achievement. I mean, look, I suppose he splits opinion, and he always has through his playing days and his managerial days. But I think that this win in particular, because I mean, I think if you look at the 2010 Waterford team that he won provincial glory with, like that was a very established team. They had already,
it was on its last legs almost,
but they had already won. They already had Munster medals to their name. The Clare thing, I suppose, started so well and then kind of tailed off and ended so badly. But like this, I think this is a huge achievement, and very interested to see where they go from here. Like, as in, this is they have 4 weeks now. Like, are they gonna, I suppose, as you're kind of alluding to, like, what way the celebrations are going to be for this, like,
Well, they're going to be in an All-Ireland semi-final against Tip, Dublin or Laois. That's a very, very tasty semi-final clash. And all 3, any 4 of those teams that were mentioned now would actually give themselves a half-decent chance. I suppose Laois less so, but Tip, Dublin, and if Dublin can get a few lads back from injury, that's a very open-sided draw. The other side, which is looking like it's probably going to end up Kilkenny against Cork, and then the winner against Limerick. I know Westmeath are in there, but let's call a spade here. They're not going to beat. They're not going to win that game. But just to go back to Cody, hasn't won championship silverware now since 2016 when they won Leinster. It's been a couple of rough years for Kilkenny fans, and they're not used to this.
No, they're not. I suppose he's probably, and I think it's true. I think he is getting just praise for he's kind of keeping them at a level of competitiveness, because the talent isn't quite coming through as it was before. I think maybe Adrian Mullen is kind of the one guy this year, is a kind of a sign of the kind of top class player that they used to bring through. And even at that, like he's still, like, he was in St. Kieran's last year, in 2018, and like, I think he got a couple of scores today. He got 1-3 in the last game. So they're not producing players like the teams of the noughties that they had coming in, but that looks like it was a chance for them there today. Will probably sting a bit. Like, it looked, it was a game obviously that a goal was going to be kind of crucial, and it looked like Roy O'Connor seemed to really catch fire today. Like, we know he's hugely talented. I was kind of filled for that. So yeah, that's it's an interesting start, right? Like, it's 16 is the last time he managed to get silver.
When you think about it, one of the reasons that Kilkenny always seem to get over the line in tight games over the years, never mind having just supreme talent, but they never panicked when things were kind of a little bit desperate towards the end. Today, I felt they were all going for goals. They went for goals too early, and if they had to just tick away at the points, there was still 3 or 4 minutes. You get 1 point, have it down to 2 between the teams, get another one. All of a sudden, the other team panics and sits back. But they just went for goals so early, and there was one scramble where it was kicked just wide. But they kind of didn't help themselves by going for goal. Yeah,
and you'd think as well the fact that they played Wexford 2 weeks ago, and it was that kind of a, I suppose, tit for tat match. They're trading points throughout the game, and they kind of kept their heads that they seemed to always kind of say that 1 point clear of Wexford. But it seemed like the one setback they got, they looked a little bit rattled by it. Like, once they were staring at a 3-point deficit, it was like, how are we going to kind of dig ourselves out of this hole? Look, I suppose we're only kind of going on kind of maybe kind of properly tuned into the game as the second half kind of progressed. Like, but you did kind of get that kind of sense out of it.
It was interesting in the press box here. We were all supposed to be writing our reports for Limerick Tip, but we had one eye on the Kilkenny Wexford, especially down the stretch. It was brilliant.
It was a gripping match, like, because I suppose the problem was we came here today, thinking this is going to be a great Munster final. But once Kyle Hayes got that goal during the second half, all the sense of contest out of it was gone. It was a done deal.
Did Tip give up?
I don't think
your
so.
Your father's a Tip man now, so you have skin in the game here.
He is, yeah. But I thought Limerick just like they just never. They were relentless. Like, I was quite interested. They didn't really bring on much subs like until about once Peter Casey kind of got injured. That's when they started using the bench.
Yeah.
But it looked like the likes of Hegarty, Hayes, Morrissey. It was just relentless. The ability to get scores, like, and it was just how much harassing they were doing of it, especially the Tip full backline coming out with the ball. I mean, I suppose the big one was James Barry, Peter Casey flicking the ball away from him for the second goal. But even like there was times like I think Seamus Flanagan dragged down was Barry Heffernan near the end. Like, it was just the tone was set. Like, there was no way they were kind of letting them out easy.
So we wouldn't have seen the Laois Westmeath game, of course, because it was on at the same time as this game. Some achievement for Eddie Brennan to take Laois up to the Leinster Championship for next year, considering when you think there was a toxic atmosphere at the start of the season because of Ross King and what happened with his teeth getting knocked out in the county final by the Camross guy, and all the fallout on Snapchat and all that toxic stuff. And then he was talking about why would players not commit, because not all the best players were committing. Some achievement.
Yeah, and like, I suppose when he kind of moves into that job, maybe a lot of people are thinking, look, this is just the guy who's trying to, I suppose, kind of
build his way towards
his
Kilkenny job.
CV, and like that's what everyone thinks, isn't it? When any kind of Kilkenny, I suppose, legend is kind of moving into the kind of managerial sphere. But yeah, because especially, I mean, like, even the first game against Offaly would have been kind of seen as, tightly enough balance beforehand. Like, but they really kind of picked up a head of steam, and just from seeing the results today, like, that looks like a really, really emphatic win. I suppose just the wider issue is it going to be a situation that they're going to be back, in 2021? And I mean, like, we've seen it with Carlo, like the kind of yo-yo effect that starting very strongly in the Leinster round robin, and then as it progresses, kind of struggling to kind of really make the impact. So, like, it's great for today. It's great that they have that game to look forward to next weekend. But in a wider sense, I think the 5-team Leinster thing is going to come. There's going to be a bit of heat coming in.
Probably should be 6, just to give, if you go up, give you a decent chance to kind of build. And fair enough, if you get relegated, if you're the bottom of 6 teams, I think everyone will accept you have to go. But at the moment, it is just one team is just going to be up and down every single year, and the rest of the 4 are going to stay there. But an interesting thing with Eddie Brennan now is he's coming up against Dublin. And do you remember during the league semi-final, Limerick and Dublin, he was unhappy with the styles going on here, and I don't want to overdo it here and over-egg it, because Eddie would have respect for both teams, as I spoke to him afterwards about it, but he did say there was an element of it was like rugby with sticks.
Well, he was obviously quite frustrated, I'd say, watching that game at home, on the phone, and it was that kind of a game. I mean, it was interesting in the sense of looking at Limerick today, Dublin, and like, obviously you know Maddie Kenny very well, and the cooler players involved, but they did seem to match up very well to Dublin that day, or sorry, to Limerick that day, and did seem to frustrate them. So it'll be interesting to see how Eddie fares trying to bring Laois. It'll be against that next weekend.
Midfield battle zone, I reckon. Finally, your own County Cork, 3rd in Munster Championship. Do you see a way to the All Ireland for them? Do you see them picking up enough head of steam to get there? Like Westmeath first, obviously.
Yeah, look, I think they should get past that next week, and then it would be Kilkenny in the quarterfinals stage in a fortnight. I mean, in the overall sense, in their All-Ireland ambitions, the areas that I think on the back of last year and through their round robin were, is their squad stronger? I think it is. I think guys like Niall O'Leary have come along. They've got Aidan Walsh back involved, Stephen MacDonald back involved. So I don't think you're going to have a situation like last year where they were bringing guys back on who were injured in the All-Ireland semi-final. So I think they have solved that to an extent. Whether they have solved the full backline issue, I mean,
Colm Spillane, will he be right?
Doesn't seem so, no. Like, John Myler was asked after the Clare game and said he's not going to be right. And
huge loss.
He's like, even strength wise, you see Aaron Gillan today, like, Cork by Limerick, who's actually going to take on Gillan?
Well, probably Owen
Callaghan did very well, but you'd imagine Limerick are going to try and move him around a bit more than what they did in the round robin game. And Peter Casey alongside him looks in a lot better form now. So you'd still have a little bit of, like, it's not just the full backline personnel issue, it's how kind of Cork as a team kind of manage. So that is still probably an issue, and also just kind of the fade in and outs of games, So yeah, look, I would have thought before today that it was Limerick and Tip were kind of the front runners for the All Ireland, and other than the two of them, I would have thought Cork were best placed. Now you'd probably have to say Cork are probably just at a level, maybe Wexford and Tip.
Cork do match up well with Limerick.
Yeah, they
You've
do.
beaten them this year. Last year, All Ireland semi-final, 6 up with 10 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Probably should have seen it out.
Like the couple of things they do well, I think, is that Harnedy pushes up very well on Declan Hannon, who tries to get free. And the other thing they did well last year, and again this year, and you wonder will Limerick try and counteract that, is Daniel Carney. He kind of floats, obviously physically he doesn't match up to the Limerick half backline, but he kind of floats in between where Garrod Hegarty and I think it was Dimmer Burns who was marking last year in Croke Park, got 4 points in play, just picks up a lot of loose ball. You have someone like Darragh Fitzgibbon on, Cian Lynch, so they have some big plus points that way. Like Patrick Horgan's in brilliant form. They're probably going to need, like, you know, I suppose Conor Dehan coming off the bench to try and get back maybe up to full speed. You know, they've obviously Shane Kingston utilised. The other big thing they have this year, so I forgot to mention, I think, is Alan Cadigan's presence. He was a huge loss last year. Looks in really, really good form. Caused Limerick a lot of problems when he came on.
And even Clare, even though it was a poor enough performance overall.
So I think offensively in a better place.
So that's never really the problem, is it?
Squad depth is a bit better. It's just that whole kind of fading in out of games and just that kind of defensive cohesion and the one-on-one inside. Like, because I mean, like Galan was in brilliant form in the league. He still looks a really, really good target man. But I thought today was Casey's form for me was like the big one. I mean, like
he was terrible the week before. Let's call it spade. He was very bad.
I think he's been scoreless in 2 games in Munster. He was scoreless against Cork as well. And Clare game was probably the only big one that he played. He got 4 points in play here, but like 1-5 from play today. And yeah, that's like I think it's him and William O'Donoghue are the only 2 changes from the All Ireland starting 15.
Which is interesting because last year they couldn't get into the team because the Pierce were obviously in the All Ireland series so late. They missed all the league more or less, and then you know the team was set before then. Whereas now they've had the whole league. Now we have
yesterday's news with the club finals going to January, so this will be less of an issue.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, do you think that's a good or a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I suppose the semi-finals might be a bit tricky. Are they going to be too close to Christmas for teams? But I mean, I just thought the 8 or 9 weeks, that was very difficult from the outside looking at it. Very difficult for clubs to manage, and I think the punished players trying to get into county teams, trying to come back in and march into league setups and all that, like we've seen with Finn. I suppose in the Pierce last year. You know, I think it's a better move. Look, ideally you'd love to have it done in December, but I think with the Leinster football scene, how long that takes to, unless you do a week on week, I think that it could be tricky to get everything completed in time by November as you'd need it to be.
My big problem is that, like last year when we did it with Coola, so I think we played Leinster final in Portlaoise. The weather was lovely in December. It was like unseasonably lovely, and obviously it's so erratic you can't predict what it's going to be like. But then throughout January there was actually snow on the field a lot of days. I remember one day we went out to Parnells because it was the only place with a usable pitch, artificial surface, and we were using an advertising hoarding to scrape snow off the pitch. And I'm thinking, imagine trying to train for an All-Ireland semi-final on January the 4th with that weather and people not even being able to make it to their training sessions. Like we had challenge matches against Laois. We got down to Laois, it was called off. Challenge match against Kilkenny. I'd have loved to actually play against Kilkenny, that would have been unbelievable. And they're just called off, so I just think this is going to cause more headaches again.
You imagine it'd be very tough for clubs training, like even like Ballyhale would always talk, you hear the stuff about like for this, you know, one of the greatest clubs in Ireland, they don't have the most amazing facilities. I think they use Thomastown, I think is it Haywood Community School in Laois as well a bit, like, you know. So yeah, you could imagine it's going to be tricky for clubs. I mean, I'm presuming, are they going to put the semi-finals in Croke Park? Like, is there going to be an issue? You know, they've one
maybe
venue,
Thurles even, you know,
and they've a backup venue given the weekend it is. But well, I think it's a good move. You know, I think just thought the long layoff was crazy.
I'm a little bit unsure of it at the moment. Yeah, I'd like it to be done within the calendar year, but maybe it's a step in the right direction.